Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Hey folks, Al Martin here. Thank you for making your way back to Making Data Simple. Look, I have got a colleague today that we're going to have a chat. We're going to have a chat like we're at the bar, as always. And Chris Konarski is here with me. And let me give you a little backdrop. I run technical sales at IBM. Technical advisors, they drive experiential selling. That's architectures, demos, and pilots. But they leverage client engineering is what we're going to talk about here in a bit on that experiential selling, because they are very, very well versed and tuned towards co-creation with clients. They have designers. There's several roles within that we'll talk about. And then we take that, we progress opportunities to client value. So it's technical advisors, that experiential selling that I work with client engineering on, and then we progress opportunities to client value. So I have with me today Chris Konarski, who's the Vice President of Client Engineering, as we call it. Thank you for jumping in the fire with me. We work together a lot. This will be fun just to have a bar chat today.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. I mean, I look at you as being like the Joe Rogan of data.
Right.
I hope our session today is better than his Netflix series, though.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I looked at that the other day, didn't like it, so turned it off. I was a little disappointed. So hopefully I'm not Joe Rogan today. First of all, did you ever watch Seinfeld?
A little bit.
Look, Seinfeld, this podcast is a little bit like Seinfeld. This is a show about nothing or anything that we want it to be. Today, it's going to be about client engineering, but it's also about getting to know Chris. So I hope you're ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. So let's do it. So who is Chris Konarski? Let's start there.
Chris Konarski. So Jersey native, chemical engineering background, been with IBM 25 years, believe it or not. And have played a lot of roles. I started in our microelectronics division as an engineer in the fab, building semiconductors. Progressed my way through microelectronics, made my way into the hardware division, doing storage, power in our mainframe. And then I've been in software for the last 5-6 years. So a lot of different roles, from engineering to technical sales, business development, strategic partnerships. That's kind of my career in a nutshell.
Has it always been sales?
No, I started as a developer, engineer, building chips. Got my first patent doing process development in semiconductor manufacturing, and then from there went to development of semiconductors, characterization, test, those kinds of things. Got my MBA, so let me try out this business thing. And ran the chip gaming business. So IBM used to make all the microprocessors for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and the Wii U. Mega business for us. We made all those chips, and I ran that relationship for a few years. So really a kind of a diverse background before I made it to technical sales.
Why did we ever get out of that?
It just wasn't core. We were shifting the business to more software, and chips is a bit of a commodity business, and you need to have the scale. So we partnered with Global Foundries, and they took over the business for us.
So where does chemical engineering come into this?
Making chips is pretty chemical intensive. So IBM at that time was really looking for adding a lot of chemies. So they were heavily recruiting chemies in their Burlington, Vermont chip manufacturing plant. I was not thinking IT. I was thinking petro, pharmaceutical, but made my way into IT based on some really great recruiting tactics that IBM did to kind of pursue me to give it a try.
That's awesome. In terms of your background, anything that those listeners that know you would be surprised to know around your career? Any surprises?
First patent, wrote a book a couple years back, Cloud Without Compromise, with Paul Zakopoulos and a few others. So it was all about the shift to cloud and hybrid being the strategy. So call it a business user guide to hybrid cloud. So for folks that haven't read the book, I would say take a peek at it. Cloud Without Compromise. You can get it on Amazon and a few other places where you can download.
Is it still holds its relevance? I mean, it was a couple of years ago, but still the same thing?
Still holding its relevance. It's kind of forecasted the future, what we're seeing play out today.
All right, I like it. Let's jump into client engineering. Yeah. What is it? Why is it necessary?
So IBM invested 4 years ago in a new team, and think about it as a new way, an experiential way to work with clients and partners. So we went in about 6-month period, hired 1,000 new people into IBM. Really diverse client set, a lot of early professional hires, and we put together a multidisciplinary team. You kind of alluded to it before. The magic here is, if you think of a traditional POC team in the industry, you think of all technical individuals, engineers, tech sellers, architects that are building something technical, working with technical people. We took a different approach here. We took a very agile, design-led approach, and we put together a set of roles that work together in a squad to show up differently with clients. And let me talk about those roles for a minute. One is the designers. I call that really the secret sauce. That's what is very differentiating in the way we go to market with this team. And a designer, my funny name for them is human engineers, right? They're the human engineers of the team. They're obsessed on the user. They ask very different questions than an engineer would or a technical individual. So they play a critical role. The next role is something called the business technology leader. And think of that as the MBA person or the person that's really obsessed on business value. So if you got someone obsessed on the users and the humans, designer, things only get put into production and really make traction if there's a use case and business value. So we make sure that our business technology leaders are obsessed on business value. That's ROI calculators. That's really understanding the need. Can you understand the value, articulate the value when you're done? Is there good scoping? Is it a business priority for our clients? The next role is a solution architect. I would say that's a traditional role. You need someone that's got the diverse set of experiences working with a lot of different technologies to put the pieces together. So they're typically the more senior technical advisor on the squad. Then we have our platform engineers. And our platform engineers, they think about, okay, if we're doing an AI use case, how are you actually going to accelerate this into production? So are you thinking about security? You're thinking about APIs? Where's the landing zone? What infrastructure will it run on? So they start putting together the pieces that allow it to accelerate into adoption and usage. And then the last one, our newest role, is the AI engineer. So I'm proud to say we've built the largest AI engineer team in pre-sales in the industry. So we have almost 1,000 AI engineers that we've built and skilled around the world that's helping IBM accelerate our pilots in generative AI. So let me pause there, see if you got any questions so far.
So several questions. I try to be a little bit provocative.
Yeah, go for it.
You're great at this kind of stuff, of course, right? This sounds like a lot of roles, though. I mean, do we overwhelm the client? And how would you say, no, that we don't, and here's why? How would you respond to that?
I mean, we don't show up everybody in the same meeting. Everyone plays a part in the role in the cycle of scoping these things, qualifying these pilots, and then executing on the pilot. So we really want the platform engineer and the AI engineer, they're hands-on keyboard. The designer's there to workshop to make sure, are we solving the right business problem? Is there buy-in? Do we understand how it's going to be used? And that business technology leader, they're working with the lines of business to say, okay, can we help you sell this internally to build a business case? So like everybody plays a role along the whole process. And what's really cool here is most people would think, okay, that's got to take 3 or 6 months to do one of these. We do this in under 4 weeks. So this is a very rapid, at speed, co-creation and build in order to prove something out. So it's not everybody showing up in the same meeting with 10 people in the room. It's everybody plays a role. And many of our team are working on multiple pilots with multiple clients. So it really does work.
How did IBM get by before this happened, before this team was created? Like 4 years ago, you say this team was newly created. How many people, if you don't mind me asking today, worldwide?
So right now, we're over 2,000 people globally.
So you got 2,000 people. How did IBM, or did we not get by?
I think a lot of it goes to how we changed today's IBM. And it started with Arvind's leadership. And I would say accelerated when we acquired Red Hat. We learned a lot about their culture and how they work with clients, how they work with the ecosystem and developers. So that's where this really started. And, the characteristics of the people we hired, not only did we just bring in fresh new talent, we brought in people that were from competitors, from AWS and Microsoft and other places. But, what we really hired for was people that were client obsessed. It always starts with the client. Bias to action, meaning that they're doers, they're hands on. They don't ask for permission. What I loved about this team is they didn't know who could tell them no. They just go do it, and that created kind of a startup mentality for us, and also that they're curious learners. So like they may have come in with a technical skill in a different area of software, but we always put them in a position of new learning. And I think that's just part of the culture and the way IBM has evolved. So I would say it was right place at the right time to accelerate IBM's culture change over the last 4 or 5 years.
I like that. Client success, bias to action, curiosity. Is that how you hire? Is that part of your hiring?
Yeah, that's our rubric, right? We hire for biased action, curious learners, and they fit into our culture. And honestly, people figure out if it's the right place for them or not within 6 months, and then they don't want to leave. And they just love the culture. We have a very open culture, highly engaging team, and a lot of doers, and that's why I love being part of it.
Do you think the culture in the client engineering team is different from the greater IBM?
Well, it's a tough question, Al. I would say we were an accelerator, and I'm seeing more of that type of speed and doing, curiosity, risk-taking approach happening more pervasively. There are still teams and organizations that are maybe earlier in that journey, but it's become a business priority for us. And you've probably read the book, The Geek Way, of how we're changing as a company. And I think you're seeing more examples like client engineering all pop up around the company, including what you're doing in technical sales.
Look, I got to give a little love to the designers, as you mentioned it. I don't think they get enough love. And by example, I was talking to a startup the other day, and we were comparing notes. They were asking me for advice. And I was like, look, you need to have a few designers in here to help out. This isn't PowerPoint jockeys. This is really around adding depth to the solutions that we're providing in new ways that really make them pop. I mean, that's probably a bad explanation, but he was like, I can't afford it. He's a startup. I get it. But my argument to him was, you can't afford not to have these people in there.
Yeah, they really think about how the user is going to need this. And again, it goes back to that different type of lens. I do have people that come up and say, hey, can I put a designer on this to help me with this PowerPoint? I mean, and I say no, because that's not their job. Their job is really to find the essence of need in the user so that when a technology gets deployed, that it's embraced by the community that's going to use it on a day-to-day basis. And they're very good visionary thinkers to take kind of like what's something maybe a complex technical solution and putting it in a lens that's explainable and understandable, almost like a picture. Like they draw great pictures of the current state to the to be state, and where all the pains and needs of the user have built up to that. And another place I've seen that work really well at IBM and other companies is the very best teams that build product have a really strong design presence, and how they use those designers to access their client base to do rapid iteration and improvement on product development.
It makes sense. Let's talk about 4 weeks. I think the listeners, if they're paying attention, they're thinking 4 weeks, that is an accelerated period. It depends on what use cases, but what can you really get done in 4 weeks?
I would say, about 80% of what we work on today is AI, Watson X for the IBM product. And AI actually accelerated our speed to get things done. We're seeing a lot of common patterns, and we take reusable assets. We take things that have worked with other clients in other industries, and we replicate those working solutions customized for the client. So we bring in our kind of collective experience. In the last 12 months, we've done over 3,000 pilots on just Gen AI. So it's a huge database of client experience that we take that collective knowledge to accelerate other clients' path to a solution. But let me break down those 4 weeks. The first few days is just about setting the scope and defining the use case. One of the main reasons projects fail, especially in AI, is you haven't picked the right use case. So if you pick the right use case through a workshop or sometimes the clients are very clear on their most important need. You start there, you build kind of the architecture around that, and then through rapid, agile co-creation sprints where the client is co-creating with us. This only works if the client is just as invested as we are to move fast. And every week you show progress with the goal that at the end of 4 weeks, we're gonna show a working prototype, a pilot that is on the path to production. It's not quite production ready. Sometimes they're a little further along. My favorite example, which happened last quarter, was working with a large U.S. medical college where they saw their enrollment going up 2-3x. You can't change the enrollment dates. So working with them from the very first meeting to the end of the pilot was 4 weeks. 4 weeks later, they were in full production using generative AI to better screen candidates, not miss great candidates, make sure they are not biased in their selection process, and save the evaluators tons of time to really find the best featured doctor. So changing lives.
Is that where you think AI is going to provide the most impact, at least in the short term? Like going through those type of documents?
Yeah, I think, listen, summarization, RAG use cases, if I had to boil it down into 3 areas that we've seen the most traction, by far number one is kind of customer care, customer support. So, assistants, web-based assistants have been around for a really long time, but everyone's kind of evolving their assistants. How do you get information in the hands of the requester? And that could be internal, that could be client-facing. The other one is digital labor, we call it. And that's, listen, everyone has mundane tasks that can be automated or saves you time. I like to think of it as both personal productivity gains and enterprise productivity gains. And if you take that approach to it, you can save people a lot of time. So how do you help people save time, get back productivity? And then the third one, and we've really seen an uptick on this one, is code explanation and code generation. Saving those developers, understanding many lines of code, billions of lines of code, so that you can understand your landscape and then also do app modernization from there. So those are kind of the 3 areas. But RAG use cases or summarization by far is the number one task, and it's pretty quick to implement. Last year was the year of explanation, and we'll call it the ChatGPT craze. But now we're seeing with smaller models, we can really build pinpoint solutions that solve tasks and certain business challenges in certain environments. And these things can be implemented really quickly. And we're seeing that, helping clients do that every day.
I have to make a comment in terms of tech sales. I think where we do really leverage client engineering is in those AI use cases, as you mentioned, because you guys do it over and over. You learn what works, what doesn't. Look, if you look at the industry right now, what was it? I don't know if it was Gartner. I don't want to use their name in vain, but he said only 10% or 20% of the AI use cases are actually making their way to production. What do you think your win rate is?
Win rate or adoption rate? Those are two different.
Both. Let's go with both. Good clarification.
Okay. Before I answer it, I think there's 2 reasons that AI projects fail and where people get it wrong. One is getting the data matters, getting the data right, and what's the data quality, what's the data access, and the security around it. And if you can't trust your data, I was talking to a client a few weeks ago, and they want us to help them on sales productivity. So, okay, do you trust your data? Not really. Things are still on spreadsheets. So unless we fix your data problem first, you'll never trust the AI in production. So that's number one. If you don't have the right data architecture and understanding data fabric, then your AI project will fail. The second one is governance. So if you got the data right, you got the right use case, people are afraid to have something that's externally facing because there's regulatory risks. The laws are changing every day. There's data privacy. Good governance is also another reason that's, we'll call it a major speed bump to adoption and usage. It's just the balance of risk versus reward. So I think those, if you got those 2 right, we are seeing that I'm going to call it conversion or win rates is about 1 out of 3 pilots lead to a client wanting to use our software, which I'm not satisfied there. I'd like it to be higher. We're driving to like a 50% win rate, but I would say right now we're about a third. A third of our pilots get accepted by the client. The value is high enough that they say, yes, we want to move forward with you. Now, for adoption, a lot of these wins have just happened in the last 3 to 12 months. And we're starting to see, as the example I mentioned before, adoptions, things going into production. And I don't have an exact number for you, but I would say you're going to see an acceleration. Like our goal is to get people up and running in 3 months or less. I would say right now it's probably 6 months or less. And I think so our speed to adoption as clients get more comfortable after they get that first use case and they got the good data architecture and the good governance, we're going to see a huge acceleration of adoption and moving into deployment. And that's actually a big focus for my team next year as we've kind of been doing our 2025 planning is like if there's 2 words to use, accelerate adoption is going to be our mission. So if we're doing it right on the use case development, the build, the proving, the value creation, that's only going to accelerate the speed of adoption.
Based on your answer that we're not winning or maybe that don't get adopted, would you say, hey, yeah, they're characterized back to where I started, data and governance issues? Do you agree with that? Or is there use case problems?
I think it's a use case problem, right? I mean, some of these, you really got to say, have you picked the right use case that's got the business level support? I mean, there's investment required. There's change management that's required. We're also finding that clients need help working with a service partner or a professional service to bring this stuff into production because it's new. It's not only just a tech change, but it's also a culture change, a transformation that's got to happen. There's a lot of change management that needs to happen when you're shifting an organization to work with AI and versus just use AI. And there's a lot of cultural change there. There's business processes that need to change. And I think that also, if you don't pick the right use case, then, and the value is not high enough, then you're also, which means we just did a poor job in defining the use case with the client. So that's why we keep learning based on the ones that are being deployed and adopted. Those are the ones we're kind of helping guide clients down that path to say, listen, we have confidence. If you'd like to speak to this client, we'll do an introduction, a one-on-one NDA discussion, or we could do some blinded references. I've been posting a lot on LinkedIn lately, so that's one way for your followers to catch up with me. I know you usually close with that, but LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me. And I even just this past week, I posted a couple use cases we've done, blinded references with clients.
So look, I know you do much more than AI, but I want to stick on this theme just because it's a good way to characterize what client engineering can offer. Where are you getting frustrated most, though? To your point, I know we as an organization have to learn what use cases actually hunt and which don't. A lot of times a client, I would presume, comes to you and says, I got this great use case. You say, all right, the client believes in it. We can do it. And we prove it out, but somehow we land in science experiment land because they really hadn't done their homework back in their own house, like whether it's data, whether it's governance, whether it's change management, as you mentioned. How much, and maybe we need to do more work on our end. How much of it is our end where we're frustrated? How much is, look, you're frustrated where the client is and they say, yeah, that's great. It did work out, but we're not going to implement it. And you're like, oh, I mean, where does the line of distinction reside someplace in there?
It's a lot about the right questions we ask in the beginning of the process. Again, we're refining this every week. This is a continuous improvement. We're I would say we're okay to good now. We're on the path to wanting to be great. But even when we're great, we'll be relentless. We're going to want to improve this every week. And as the tech changes, as we have more clients that are adopting, we get better at the questions we ask to help guide our clients. But it really does start in the scoping and in the science projects. I would say 2 years ago, we did a lot of science projects. It was trying to kind of get reps in the gym with the team. We wanted to build since it was a new team, we had to build confidence with the team that we kind of had to earn the right at the table to work on their most important things. And after 4 years, we've earned that spot at our clients' trust and within IBM. So now we're working on like the most important initiatives, top 3 priorities. And through the workshopping process, that design approach, the solution architect, working with your account technical leaders and other parts of IBM, our services teams that have deployed this, we can guide and scope. And so we got to always be cautious of scope creep. And that's why with a goal of four weeks, it's you kind of reduce the risk of going off the rails. And listen, if we pick the wrong one in 4 weeks, we learn from it and we go work on the next use case. I mean, this is not a one and done with these clients. We're trying to do one every month of what's a different use case, different division, different department, different country. So this is not a one and done thing, but rather a long-term trusted relationship we've built with our clients to always be working on the next use case with them.
I think that's a good explanation. The interesting thing is the market went down. I think it was last week. I don't know when this is going to air. But the market goes down. I'm watching the media. And one of the reasons they said the market went down is because there's been a lot of hype around AI, and now that hype is kind of dying down. And I gotta tell you, my reaction was based on our workings together, the successes that I'm seeing. I'm like, what are they talking about? I understand there is some hype. There's always hype in anything, but this is real. You can differentiate yourself very quickly as a company. You mentioned the example there. I think I've also mentioned this on this podcast before, but I say it again. And your team did a lot of work here around Seville.
Yeah,
the football FC. Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, and I gave that as an example when I did AI in sports for the SEC conference. It's like a very simple use case. I mean, think about this. Very, very simple, where they had over 200,000 different player reports they had to go through. It would take over 400 hours. As humans, we're inconsistent. You go through that, right? And it's like, well, you get tired. AI didn't get tired, right? But we get tired. You're trying to pick which athletes that you want to bring onto your organization. When they came up with a model, we implemented this model. I mean, you know this better than anybody. You can make a few comments after I'm done here. But we implemented this model. It gets done in minutes. So now they can take that. It's consistent on the athletes that they want, and then they can devote that time to one-on-ones to make sure they fit their culture. I mean, that's a simple use case. The other use case you referred to on the college, I think the college you mentioned, I could be wrong here. You tell me. But it was they started giving free tuition. So what happens? You get a lot of applicants. And so it's the same kind of philosophy. Okay, how do we choose these applicants? Say a few words on that. Does it worry you that AI is making a lot of these decisions, though?
Listen, all the pilots we've worked on and the ones that are being deployed have a human checker in the loop. And that's what allows me to sleep at night. But it saves the checkers a lot of time. Like you said, humans, they need rest. They're inconsistent. They can be biased at times. And
all the time. Yeah.
All the time. Yeah, all the time. And so you drive a level of consistency and speed, and you're just able to go through more information to help make better decisions. And so I do think that's where the max productivity will gain. That's where we'll see the biggest ROI over the next couple years. And I think sometimes what not the analysts, but we'll call it the press, people get confused with the robotic AI of the future replacing everything and doing anything. But these are, I'm going to call it, relatively simple tasks that just save people a lot of time and drive better end results. And yeah, you need the right data to make those decisions. You need a checking process before it goes out the door. But I think you've talked about maybe on this podcast before, like what we did with HR within IBM. It's like one of my favorite use cases to talk to clients about, where we had these massive call centers. You or I would have to go on the phone and wait in queue, or you have to try to figure out something in Workday to transfer an employee and make all these changes. Now we just ask an assistant, it connects to the back-end systems, and the automation is there. It saves us a lot of time. Yeah, there's still complex issues. And when it's complex issues, it gets you to a human. But I think anything that's just going to save people a lot of time, and that's one thing I'm really obsessed with my team in client engineering, kind of second half of this year and going into next year, is we just did something like a hackathon. We call it a Watson X Challenge across all of IBM. It was like 170,000 people. And we took our client engineering team and we said, rather than just go work on any use case, let's focus our 2,000 people on things that are going to help improve our day-to-day job. What are the things that are difficult or frustrated with that you can eliminate, automate, or use generative AI to replace? So we came up with hundreds and hundreds of ideas. We picked the top 10 and we're going to implement those. And it's just going to make our teams work life better. They're going to spend more time on the more complex fun stuff that requires their brains and to use versus something that is just wasting a lot of time searching for information and summarizing it, which is, again, it goes back to the first use case that we're seeing most common right now.
What kind of companies, organizations would you advise, hey, you need to have a client engineering team? And a second part to that question is, what's in and what's out? In other words, what works with client engineering, and what do you say? No, we can't. We can't do X because that's not our charter. It will not work out. That's outside the bounds of our scope.
Let me start with the second part there. Where we draw the line is we don't want to be touching production systems and deploying this stuff. I mean, we're showing. Here's a use case. We'll show you how to prove value, measure value, and how it could work. But it's on a smaller data set. Sometimes it's in synthetic data. Sometimes we got to replicate what's done at the client. Ideally, we're working in their firewall, on their on-premise or in their cloud account, but that doesn't always happen. So we're kind of proving the art of the possible and giving kind of the blueprint or architecture that can be easily deployed. But where we draw the line is, and we get asked a lot, can you help us deploy this? We love your team. Can they carry this through into the adoption phase or the production phase? And we do draw the line there. And that's intentional because that comes with, different risks, longer periods of time. We're very focused on the pre-sale side. We do work on like deployment use cases, but again, it's more to prove things out. So that's what we don't do.
Can I interject there real quick?
Yeah,
so I'm going to put my bubble wrap on, but I think this is important. And that is, I guarantee you there's people out there listening saying, well, why doesn't, this is tech sales job. They can just do this. So, a sales engineer, for those of you that call it an SE, whatever, it's the same thing. Why can't they just do this, man?
Typically your typical SE or tech seller, they're very specialized in a product. And think of this as a solution team that's the last mile. So rather than in the early, let me demo something for you, let me prove the function features of a product, let me prove how it works with other things, that's really important. But when you start talking about complex solutions that integrate across multiple products, and honestly, we work with a lot of open source and we work with competitive products because that's the day in the life of a hybrid environment in an IT environment. So we bring in a lot of these open source and other product knowledge so that we replicate kind of what the client's environment looks like and build a solution. And since we're able to bring in that like 360 perspective of business, user, architects, and hands-on keyboard people, I think it's different. I really do think it's different than what your typical SME or specialist would be in a pre-sales role. That's why
I agree with you.
And that's the squad approach. Like we couldn't do it if we just picked our AI engineer and said, okay, that's what client engineering is going to do. Then it's no different than a SME specialist. But when you pair them up with an architect, pair them up with a business person, pair them up with a designer, and you're co-creating with the client, and you're able to dedicate 4 solid weeks with them, I find that a lot of other pre-sales people, they're kind of jumping around between a lot of clients and a lot of different activities and groups. They're trying to keep up with the latest thing on the product they specialize in. So you just don't have that same level of focused dedication like we do.
I'll reiterate, we're a great partnership. We work extremely well together. It's really produced benefits and value to the client in an expedited fashion, particularly concentrating on that solution piece that you mentioned. And we already talked about the more of these you do around AI, and we do AI pilots as well, but you can see, and usually AI is always going to cross enter into that solution framework like you mentioned. So it's very, very helpful. But back to the original question. So would you advise this to every company, or is it just IBM because we're so big or whatever?
I would say partners, ecosystem partners, service partners, ISVs. It's a great way to engage with clients. I think on the client side, they already have their IT teams and their architects and their lines of business. So I'm not sure I would recommend designers be on the client side, but for any technology company, or if you're selling product, I think having this kind of view, is really important. And we've worked with partners around the globe. I was in Saudi Arabia last year, and there's a large partner who we told them about client engineering, and they were like, "We love this. We want to build this." So we with our ecosystem partners, we give them the full cookbook. It's open kimono, like all our assets, all our technical environments, are how we hire people. And in this case, in the Saudi team, we actually interviewed their candidates as if they were part of our team, and they built their own client engineering team. So I'm starting to see more and more partners that when they work with us, they're like, this really works with clients. And the way they become more autonomous, not dependent on, let's say, IBMers to help them work with their clients, our clients, collective clients, without all our team members there. We kind of do a crawl, walk, run approach with them. That they shadow us on an engagement. Then on the second one, we work it together. And then the third one, they do it on their own, and we shadow them and provide coaching and guidance. And we're always here to help. But for all the partners out there in the ecosystem, here's an offer that our team will come in and help you build one of these teams, give you the full blueprint of what's worked, all the lessons learned, the rubrics for hiring, how we assess people. And, we would love to share this with others.
Nice. That's a generous offer, given all the intellectual capital that you guys have put into that. Fantastic. But that's IBM, right? I had one other question with that. What other company profiles have a client engineering organization that you know of, like even competitors? Do they have it, or is it unique to IBM?
I'm trying to think. We have seen others that do it. Client engineering, its early roots came from something called the garage. And in fact, our first name was the Technology Garage, and we changed it to client engineering. And I'm going on a tangent here. I'm going to go back to your question.
That's okay. I like this. Keep going.
When you think of the word engineer, Al, what are the words that come to mind?
The words that come to mind is very technical, hands-on keyboard, solution-oriented, results, impact. That's what I think of immediately.
So that's what we do with clients, right? Client engineering is how we came up with the name. Because when I first came over to lead this team, I was like, is this the right name? And because words do matter. And how this translates to different languages in countries around the world, because we operate as a global team, people get it. When you say, like, when they ask, what does client engineering mean? I'm like, what does an engineer do? Okay, now we do that with clients, and we build those solutions and do all the things you said. So I do think that there's innovation. Sometimes they're called innovation teams. I know Red Hat had a similar team. Like, they'll call them labs. I think the biggest differentiator for us is most other companies, competitors, companies, partners, they charge for the service. And instead, IBM has done this as an investment in our clients and our partners. So rather than, okay, we're going to invest 4 weeks of professionals' time working with you, and this is our investment in you to see the value of IBM technology. I think that's what makes us different. There's a lot of companies, consultancies out there, competitors out there that build a services business based on what we do. And so I try to make the analogy to that, because we do a lot of things that consultants or professional services team do sell for. We build the business case, we build something. And I think our competitors that do something very similar, they charge for it, and we do it as an investment in our clients.
Can you quickly talk to how client engineering has evolved, or what you see, or how you see client engineering in the future?
think how we evolved, and I hit it a little bit before. We're finishing our 4th year of existence in IBM. Year 1 was just hiring a lot of people. Year 2 was getting them to build trust with clients and honestly with other IBMers, because we brought in a kind of like, we show up in like t-shirts, like black, the team shows up in
Literally.
jeans and t-shirts, literally t-shirts, jeans and sneakers. And that's not the IBM most people were used to seeing. So and these are a lot of early professional hires. And so we had to go through a culture shift of trust. We were in the trust building business. So after we kind of got some reps in the gym, now it was like, okay, let's focus what we work on. And you'll remember we called it technology patterns. Let's go pick 12, 15 things in the cookbook that we can do really, really well, that the teams can depend on us for, and let's do a lot of them. And so we went after volume, and that's where we started to see a lot of science projects evolve. And then the best thing that ever happened for us was the shift to AI. So as again, that Chat GPT craze went up and IBM launched Watson X was a little over a year ago, we were given, I'm going to call it the honor and privilege to kind of lead that effort from an experiential way with clients to build these pilots. And that's just been an accelerator for the team. So I think we're going to continue to be the AI team for IBM to accelerate understanding, value, and usage. And the one thing I'm pushing for is more on the adoption side. So that's where I see kind of the next year is, are we doing better pilots in the pre-sales fashion so that clients can bring them into production faster? So that's kind of, I think, the next gear that we're entering into.
This leads me right into probably my final question. I want to ask you a couple more just personally, but on how you measure success. And that is, you talked about you want more pilots to result in wins and adoptions. What's fair? I mean, like you're not going to win everything. Just not how, and you're not going to adopt everything. I mean, there are going to be a few science experiments. You want to reduce those. I get all that. But how do you define success for this organization?
There's a book I read, Measure What Matters, a couple years ago. And until I was in this leadership position, I didn't know much about an OKR system. Google, others, a lot of big tech companies follow a really religious culture around OKRs. And if you read that book, it helps focus you on what's most important and setting aspirational goals. I grew up in the IBM where if you were red on a chart, it was bad. And then you go after kind of an activity-based metric just so you're green, right? Like your focus is to be green, not red. I actually believe that if there's not enough red, you've set the wrong goals. And so we balance with this team kind of, I'm going to call it competing priorities with aspirational goals to just be better every day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year. So there's always going to be a volume statement, number of pilots or number of activities, whatever you're calling, like you want to make sure you're producing enough output. But then the impact is, okay, well, are clients actually buying or wanting what you're working with them on? That's kind of, I call that conversion or win rate. And then it's one thing for them to buy it, but now did the use case that you worked on in the beginning, is that actually get adopted? So that's kind of the full spectrum that ideally they become a IBM champion and an external reference. Like that's like the mecca, like get more and more clients using what we worked with them on and then willing to talk about it in a public forum. That's what we're after. And as long as we're making meaningful progress every quarter, every month, then I'm happy with the team, and I'm really, really proud of the team that we've built here. And I think the best is yet to come.
Nicely done, man. See how easy this is?
Yeah, it's fun.
We can keep going forever, right?
Co-creating with clients, experiential selling, being focused on business value and use cases that matter, and then move with speed. Have the right scope, have the right stakeholder management. I mean, these are a lot of basic things. That's what you obsess over with clients. Then it works.
Makes sense. What does Chris Konarski do for fun?
What do I do for fun? Love the outdoors. So my love of technology gets balanced with being off the grid, usually offshore fishing. Next week,
Is this truly off the grid? I mean, like
off
no
the
cell
grid.
phones at
Yeah.
work?
Like I have a Garmin Reach, which is not a sat phone, more like a sat texter. That no cell phone coverage, no Wi-Fi. That's how I like to spend my time. Actually, next week, which is going to be the third week in August, I'm going to be in a fishing tournament. So it's the Mid Atlantic tournament. Michael Jordan will be in there, so I get to.
So are you fishing with Michael? You and Michael? I picture you guys standing side by side.
Michael's a pretty competitive guy, and I'm fishing against Michael. And
Nice. Wow.
2 years ago,
Well, at least you're not playing basketball with it. That's good.
Exactly. But fishing, being off the grid, camping, hiking, chasing critters in the woods. That's kind of what I love to do. And what's interesting is when I'm in my boat driving 100 miles offshore, I'm actually very dependent still on technology to get home. I mean, I have compass backups and all these things, but I do like to just kind of disconnect. I think when you think of any electronic device, you gotta reboot it and charge it up, and that's how I energize myself.
Well, I hope you beat Michael Jordan, and if you do, we need to put that up as a some kind of advertisement. Yeah,
exactly.
You can beat anybody, including Michael Jordan. Do you get to see him when you're out there? Or how does that work?
I'll be out of the Cape May, New Jersey harbor. He typically goes out of Ocean City, Maryland. So, but sometimes we cruise down there and check out the boats that are there and just see what kind of fish come in. Depends on the weather. But last week, a good buddy of mine was in something called the White Maryland tournament, and his boat was basically right next to him. And he was hanging out on the boat, and everybody's taking photos. They keep the security tight. He doesn't interact with the normal folk, but he's a great competitor and he's a great fisherman. So it's always fun to say that you're in a tournament that Michael Jordan's in.
How do you keep this fair, though? I mean, it's not like what I hear you saying. It's not stock cars. It's not like everybody has the same boat, same equipment. Now I'm envisioning like some people have sonar and everything else. They know where the fish are. They got nets, whatever. How do they keep this fair?
I mean, there's rules, and it's a decently high stakes venue for prize pool. And for the major prizes, the entire crew has to go through a polygraph lie detector test, right? So that's the way they kind of keep it fair. There's a lot of rules, like the type of hooks you can use, how many lines you have, the type of bait you can use. But at the end of it, we're talking $1 million prizes here. And you said people are out in the ocean, 100 plus miles offshore. Anything kind of goes out there but if things don't seem right, they do the polygraph tests, and that's usually catches the issues. So there was actually a funny YouTube one where someone got caught with, again, not in this tournament, but people sticking weights down the fish to be a little bit heavier. But
I was going to say, so this isn't a lead and fish situation,
no,
is it?
They open and they have marine biologists. They could tell how long a fish has been dead for. I mean, this is a professional operation. So not only they're checking that this makes sense, the genetics of the fish. I mean, and then they're checking to see if the whole crew has a consistent story. And these crews are pretty big. Like the team that I'm on, there's 10 of us, and a crew like what Michael Jordan has, which is a bigger boat, is probably 15 to 20. So having there's always a weak link. If
you don't want to be the weak link.
There's always a weak link if the team's lying, right? So that's but this is it's a sporting event.
Do you plan on winning?
So I did bring in a number 2 fish in the Wahoo category 2 years ago, and I feel really good. I feel like we're gonna place in one of the categories. We focus on the pelagic fish. That's like tuna, mahi, wahoo. The big money fish, where the guys like Jordan focus, or like the blue marlin and white marlins. We dabble there, but we're more tuna fishermen and pelagic fishermen.
All right, Chris, I got to ask you this question. It's a tough question that I ask people. It's the funniest question that I have, and so I can't let it go. It's what's true, but nobody agrees with Chris Konarski on.
You're going to love this one. I'm going to pivot it. Most of your most
Okay.
of your guests they pick a technology and thing, and there's some really great answers. I've loved the ones that I've followed in the past. But you and I lead large organizations, multi thousands of people, and there's a belief that you can't be too close to the action and still scale. I completely disagree with that. You need to be obsessed on the truth. And the only way to be obsessed on the truth is being always accessible and listening to the front lines. So the very best leaders that I've worked for are the ones that they're operators and they have a strong pulse on what's going on in the culture of the business. I like to think about it as the engine is revving and my hands are on the hood and I know where all the parts are misfiring because I'm so connected to the system. Now, it can be very time consuming and I would even say exhausting at times, but that's how I feel that the business is moving in the right direction. And that could be challenged as a scaling problem. You can't scale that, but I've proven that whether I lead a team of 50 or 5,000, 6,000 people, which is the size of your team, I believe you can be the CEO of a company of 100,000 people and still be close to the action in the front line, because otherwise things get completely filtered along the way. And you got to be obsessed on the truth.
But you do travel a lot. Is that why you travel a lot? And would you say sometimes it's too much, or you say no, it's about optimal?
Yeah, it's got to be really intentional. I mean, I try to make sure that I'm close to the teams. It means a lot when the leader is present. And just the sheer fact that you're going there, you learn what's going on in Indonesia or Saudi Arabia or all over Asia or in South America. It's different. And so I like to think about this as the franchise model. So we're running a franchise here. We have some global guidelines. We're not running the business by compliance, but there's going to be local differences. You go to a McDonald's in India, there's not a beef burger. There's chicken burgers and your masala sauce, right? But I go on the ground to meet the clients, hear from them directly what they're saying and thinking about IBM and the way client engineering is working with them. But I'm also learning the team, and that builds trust, and they're more open to tell you what can be better. And that's where I get all my ideas. I get my ideas from the team, and I never turn down a one-on-one with anyone in the organization at any time. I may not get to it in a week or two, but I'll always make time for a quick phone call or a 15-minute chat as soon as my calendar allows. But going to seeing the teams builds culture and trust. And I think, you could do that at any level in the company. Of course, you got to prioritize. You can't be everywhere every time. And you got to have great leaders that are running the business. I have great leaders that run the business, that we have open dialogue and trust. And we can debate things. I invite dissent. Like, tell me what I'm missing here. Like, give me a better alternative. What do you think? And I think those little things, that's what makes cultures great. And when I think of all the best leaders I've worked for in my career, they were great operators. They had a great pulse on the organization, and they knew you as an individual, and they wanted to listen, and they made the time for it.
Very good, very good. I'm with you on the one-on-ones, and I think that can get myself into trouble, though, because I want to hear from everybody. If they reach out to me, I don't care who they are. I want to learn. I want to have a quick chat with them. I recently had a power position that was open. I must have interviewed 25 people, and I'm still getting inquiries on it. Finally, I had to say, hey, look, the power position's closed. I can't do any more of these. But you want to listen to the people that say, hey, or they feel like they're ready for it. All right, let's see who this is. I want to give everybody an opportunity.
And it's important to be considered, right? I mean, even being properly considered makes people learn from the experience of maybe that feedback that you give them. I always try to go back to the individuals that did not get the position, especially for executive positions. I try to go back to those candidates and give them one tip on why it wasn't them. and something they should consider. And they learn. They if they're listening, they learn to show up better for the next interview or the next opportunity.
All right, I've got to quit asking you questions. We could go on forever, but I got to. You still drinking bourbon?
Still drinking bourbon. So you know my favorite one?
No, well, hold on. We've talked about this. I'm trying to. It's not Buffalo Trace. Is it Blanton's?
It's
Could it be
Blanton's.
Blanton?
And,
Okay.
and I never told you the story of why it was Blanton's though. So I was at an event in Nashville, client event, and the bartender was accidentally making old fashions with Blanton's. And I'm like,
accidentally?
What?
That's a waste of Blanton's, man.
But that's what converted me. I had this old fashioned Blanton's. I'm like, what's your recipe? What'd you do here? What bourbon did you use? And she showed Blanton's, and so that started my love for bourbon and Blanton's.
So it was actually mixed, and you liked it better than anything else.
Like I knew immediately it was different, and I don't drink that every day, or there's more special days for that. But even just Woodford Reserve,
it's hard to get.
I like that one as well.
I'm actually with you. I think we've talked about this. Where I think we agree to disagree is I like Weller 12 a little bit better, but on the Blanton's, you know what really stinks about it? I don't know what makes it different. I really don't, but there is something different about it. It's not, people are listening and they're probably thinking, oh, it's just, John Wick. If you watch those movies, he drinks Blanton's and stuff. No, it's not. I want another favorite. So I'll have these taste testing that I do with my friends. Now it's straight. It's just in a little tasting, and we'll all put it out. I have like 6-7 people over. We'll have like Blanton's. We'll have like Eagle Rare. We'll have Angel's Envy. Somebody will throw some garbage one in there. Just keep everybody honest. And I have to tell you, Chris, Blanton's always wins.
Yeah, and I can honestly say when I loved it, I didn't even know that's what was in there. Like it wasn't like, hey, you have to try Blanton's, it's the best. And it was just a random event that, like, I probably still, unless you would have brought me Blanton's, I probably still to this day wouldn't
appreciated
it. But that's kind of a special bourbon in my closet.
Well, for those of you listening, you should hate Blanton's. Nobody should try to go get Blanton's because I can't even get it today. So do not go get Blanton's. Leave it where it lies. Try something else. Find another favorite. Go to tequila. That's what you should do. That's my advice. All right, Chris, you're a good man. I love our partnership. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me. I think this was great. Thank you. Very eloquent. You did great.
Yeah. No, it was fun. And as I mentioned before, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive there. And
where do they find out more about? Sorry to interrupt, but where do they find out more about client engineering? Is there a client engineering page on IBM too?
Yeah, we'll post that when you drop this in, so people can check it out.
Great, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, my friend.
All right. Hey, everybody listening. I always have to thank you as well. Hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Please rate us wherever you are. And until next time, I'll see you on the podcast. See you all. Thank you.